I don't think you're going to do well in the city if you don't also know about how fast cities change, and even about why they change. Here's where I'd love to suggest again that you pick up the book by Edward Glaser called The Triumph of the City. It's not a Christian book. I hope I didn't give you that impression. But what he does is he notices how many cities now are just churning forward, how successful they are. There are exceptions, and you know, sadly, there are exceptions. There are cities that are still declining. There are some smaller cities. I mean, he brings up Leipzig in Germany and Detroit in America that are not. They're still struggling a great deal. But an awful lot of cities are reinventing themselves. And as I look out there, even though it's so bright up here and it's so dark down there, but from what I can tell, I have to say, when I'm looking at a lot of you, I say, when I was your age, because a lot of you look young, cities were commuter cities. And that is, they were like donuts, really. You had poor, non-white people in the center, dangerous down there, you know, and prosperous white suburbs around it, and the people with the good jobs lived in the suburbs and commuted in just to go to work, and then they got out. Boy, that has changed. You know, 40 years later now, we have the rise of something that nobody could have ever imagined. It's the reverse commuter. There's lots of them. Cities are such desirable places for many people to live downtown that many people live down and are willing to pay the price, the money to live downtown. And if they get a job outside, they go that way. There's an enormous amount of reverse commuting. Not only that, you now have a multi-ethnic middle and a multi-ethnic suburbs. It's not like non-whites in here, whites up here. Oh no, you got it's multi-ethnic and poor sometimes in the suburbs, and it's multi-ethnic and often rich and poor in the city. It's much more complicated than it used to be, but it's reinvented itself. And Ed Glaser says there's a great danger. You start a ministry, and he doesn't talk about ministry here, but he says you start in a city, you think, I know what cities are like. You look back for the last 20 or 30 years, you know what a city's like. Cities have the power to change because the urban constants are agglomeration, human capital, and innovation. Agglomeration, well, human capital means this: the most ambitious and the most risk-taking people tend to go to cities. And we're not just talking about the college-educated. We're also talking about the poor. We look across the world and across history, the people who are the most willing to take risks, the people who are most adventurous, the people who are most ambitious, the people with vision, usually, the people who wanted to try their talents out, they go to cities. So cities are always places of unusually high human capital, but agglomeration is the sociological term for living in proximity. And when you take the strong human capital and you put it into close proximity, all kinds of stuff happens. All kinds of innovation happens all the time, and cities reinvent themselves. And you've got to me, one of the hardest things about doing urban ministry is keeping track of the changes that are happening in your very neighborhood, the changes that are happening in your very city. Otherwise, you can just get behind, way behind. And I think that's one of the great challenges is to see that cities there are some constants about cities, and one of the constants is they are always changing.